So just a quick side note. Last night I stayed at the DoubleTree, I guess in Williamsburg. So just as an FYI, there is a dog show there. And it's Yorkshire Terriers. So I didn't get much sleep last night. So bear with me. Anyway, enjoying the cool weather here. I just wanted to get a little bit of a feel for who you all are as an audience. So usually I go around and just ask people to introduce themselves, but there are maybe too many people here, although we could do that and then I can end the whole, okay. But how many of you have a familiarity, either personally, professionally, both, or whatever, with 12-step programs? Whew. Okay, that's good. How many of you are counselors, therapists, or work in the mental health field? That's too bad. No, I'm only kidding. All right, that'll help a lot. So I'm going to go through some slides with you, this presentation, and most of you have this handout. I've been known to kind of go off on tangents and sometimes forget where I was, so I'll ask you to remind me from time to time. But other than that, we're going to be talking about an integration, really, of a philosophy, or what I would call a lifeway. It's really not a therapy, that I personally was introduced to, I'm dating myself, in 1987 in an environment, I don't know if anybody ever heard of, I guess, Ridgeview and Copac, those two facilities. Anyway, just to give you a little bit of history, I was introduced to this, and prior to the introduction, my inclination as a psychologist and clinical psychologist and therapist was more kind of dynamic or insight-oriented therapies. And this is diametrically opposite of that approach in philosophy. And so it took a little bit of time for me to integrate this, and at the same time I was introduced to kind of a 12-step orientation. Actually, I was drafted into the organization. By the way, if it's controversial, there's this program of attraction kind of idea. In the state of Florida, when you're drafted, it's kind of Howie Mandel, deal or no deal. And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I was informed that you can make it stand there until it gets thirsty. And that's my story. Okay. So what I'm going to start off with, anybody here work in managed care? Whew. Okay, good. I don't know how the audio is going to work on this. We've been kind of doing some emergency work, so if it doesn't work, I'm just going to move on. If it does work, great. I have a video that it's about 6.5 minutes long, and it's about brief solution-oriented psychotherapy from the perspective of managed care. So I'll just introduce it that way, and hopefully it'll work. And if it doesn't, oh well. Let's see. Anybody ever watch Bob Newhart? Great. You'll like this.
Dr. Switzer?
Yes, come in. I'm just washing my hands.
I'm Catherine Bigman. Janet Carlisle referred me.
Oh, yes. Still being buried alive in a box.
Yes, that's me. Should I lay down?
Oh, no, we don't do that anymore. Just have a seat. And let me tell you a bit about our billing. I charge $5 for the first 5 minutes, and then absolutely nothing after that. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Too good to be true, as a matter of fact.
Well, I can almost guarantee you that our session won't last the full 5 minutes. Now, we don't do any insurance billing, so you would either have to pay in cash or by check.
Wow, okay.
And I don't make change.
All right.
And go.
Go.
Well, tell
What?
me about the problem that you wish to address.
Oh, okay. Well, I have this fear of being buried alive in a box. I start thinking about being buried alive and I begin to panic.
Has anyone ever tried to bury you alive in a box?
No, but truly thinking about it does make my life horrible. I mean, I can't go through tunnels or be in an elevator or in a house, anything boxy.
So what you're saying is you're claustrophobic.
Yes, that's it.
All right, well, let's go, Catherine. I'm going to say 2 words to you right now. I want you to listen to them very, very carefully. Then I want you to take them out of the office with you and incorporate them into your life.
Well, shall I write them down?
Well, if it makes you comfortable, it's just 2 words. We find most people can remember them.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here they are.
Stop it!
I'm sorry?
Stop it!
Stop it?
Yes, S-T-O-P, new word, I-T.
So, what are you saying?
You know, it's funny. I say 2 simple words, and I cannot tell you the amount of people who say exactly the same thing you're saying. I mean, this is not Yiddish, Catherine. This is English. Stop it.
So, I should just stop it.
There you go. I mean, you don't want to go through life being scared of being buried alive in a box, do you? I mean, that sounds frightening.
It is.
Then stop it.
I can't. I mean, it's been with me since childhood.
No, we don't go there. Just stop it.
So, I should just stop being afraid of being buried alive in a box.
You got it. Good girl. Well, it's only been 3 minutes, so that will be $3.
Actually, I only have a 5, so
Well, I don't make change.
then I guess I'll take the full 5 minutes.
Fine. All right. Well, what other problems would you like to address?
I'm bulimic. I stick my fingers down my throat.
Stop it! What are you, nut of some kind? Don't do that.
But I'm compelled to. My mom used to call me fatty.
No, we don't go there.
But I've been having this dream.
No, we don't go there either.
But my horoscope did say...
We definitely don't go there. Just stop it. What else?
Well, I have self-destructive relationships with men.
Stop it! You want to be with a man, don't you?
Yes.
Well, then stop it. Don't be such a big baby.
I wash my hands a lot.
That's all right.
It is?
I wash my hands all the time. There's a lot of germs out there. Yeah, don't worry about that one.
I'm afraid to drive.
Well, stop it! How are you going to get around? Get in the car and drive, you kook.
Stop it! You stop it! You stop it!
What's the problem, Catherine?
I don't like this. I don't like this therapy at all. You're just telling me to stop it.
And you don't like that.
No, I don't.
So you think we're moving too fast? Is that it?
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right, then let me give you 10 words that I think will clear everything up for you. You want to get a pad and a pencil for this one?
All right.
Are you ready? Mm-hmm. All right, here are the 10 words.
Stop it or I'll bury you alive in a box!
So what we're going to talk about today is not that. Feedback. So a little bit of caution. Some of what I'm going to be talking about is going to seem overly simplistic, but also at the same time somewhat controversial. So what I will say about it at this point is to put it in a frame of reference as it applies to people perhaps that are struggling with addictions and recovery beyond the detox or physical stage of their recovery. Anyway, so give some thought to these. We're going to go back to them and then I'll kind of explain a little bit more in detail. But one of the things I kind of grew up with in school way back when was that therapy had a lot to do with connecting the dots. And the assumption would be that if you could connect the dots or have some insight as to why you were doing something that you were seeking help with, that somehow would enlighten you and you could be free of the tyranny of that problem. I never found that to be quite true, my own experience professionally and personally. The other piece of this had to do with changing your thoughts. And I don't know about you guys, but if you tell me not to think about something, I'll obsess about it. So in my experience, to cut to the chase, I don't think anybody in this room or outside this room really has as much control as they would like to over their thoughts or feelings. I don't think you can just sit down and will yourself to feel something that you don't feel. Anybody here ever end a relationship, but at the same time kind of wish that you didn't feel the way you felt or wanted to really still care about the person? Can you will yourself to love someone you don't love? Anybody? No. Can you will yourself to feel happy when you're depressed? No. And at the same time, I would say that controlling your thoughts or feelings will only be possible, but not a guarantee, by indirectly controlling what you do. So really, the only thing we have any real control over as human beings, 99% of the time, is what we do. We don't have control over how we think or feel. Yet, feelings are the holy grail. So putting this in perspective from where I sit, I would say that if I were going to define addiction, I would say all addictions, without exception, have one thing in common. They have several things in common, but one main thing in common. They're all aimed at fixing feelings. No one sticks their fingers down their throat after they eat because it's innately pleasurable. They do that to relieve anxiety, right? Self-medicate, fear of gaining weight. No one innately, although this might be a little controversial, is born liking the taste of alcohol. Classical conditioning being what it is, you associate the taste with what? Effect. So people drink for effect. What's the effect? To feel good or feel better. So if you go down the list, all addictions are about fixing feelings. With that logic, I would say, overly simplistic perhaps, is all recovery. The end game is about transcending feelings and still being able to do the next right thing. Transcending feelings does not mean denying them, pushing them aside. It means accepting feelings as they are and developing an ability to tolerate some form of discomfort. So addiction is about fixing feelings. Recovery is about tolerating them. Would you say that's a fair statement to make? Okay. Every feeling, no matter how unpleasant, has a purpose. If you didn't physically feel pain when you had a toothache, you'd die of a brain abscess. But no one in their right mind looks to feel pain. However, it has a purpose. If you didn't know sadness, you wouldn't know joy. There'd be no point of reference. If you didn't have a certain amount of anxiety before a test, you'd never study. So that's the spirit around that concept. And this one I call very important. You can think of it as triggers. Feelings change, they change over time unless re-stimulated. Feelings fade over time unless re-stimulated. I call this the Paula Goldberg effect. Have I mentioned Paula Goldberg before? No, I haven't. Okay. Paula Goldberg, just as a quick reference, as a story. How many of you remember being in 8th grade? Most of you, hopefully? And the rest have broken arms. Okay. So, is that for me? Paula Goldberg was my 8th grade crush. So prior to Paula Goldberg, I tended to be massively overweight and very interested in food. And Paula Goldberg, I remember, came into, I don't know if they still teach it, Earth Sciences class, which was like 7th period, right before the end of school. And she walked in to that class, I'm dating myself too, with white boots, like go-go boots, a mini skirt, and she was very well developed. So she strutted by my desk, and in an instant, a moment of clarity, I switched from being enamored with food to being obsessed with Paula Goldberg. Okay, so we'll speed up the tape. I know you're wondering where I'm going with all this, but anyway, stay with me. I finally, in 9th grade, lost enough weight and asked Paula Goldberg out. And from 9th grade to my senior year in high school, we were an item. Now, I grew up in New York, so there was like a diner where everybody hung out in high school. And I took Paula to the diner because I was going to tell her in my senior year that we were going off to school. I cared about her very much. We've had a great relationship. It was a great run, but it's time to part ways. Okay. Paula says to me, Marty, there's something I need to tell you. I said, okay, you go first. Big mistake. Paula says to me, Marty, I care about you very much. She broke up with me. That biatch did this to me. In a megasecond, I went from, boy, I can't wait till this is over and I can go to school and sample all these great things, to I can't live without her, this is all a big mistake. I can't believe this has happened, my heart's broken. And for like the first 6 months, I was doing Paula Goldberg Friday Night Vigil. You light a candle, perhaps you smoke something, whatever. You lip sync. I don't know if anybody remembers Little Anthony and the Imperials. Tears on My Pillow, Going Out of My Head. There's even a song, Hey, Hey, Paula. Huh. Anyway, of course, my parents would walk in. I wouldn't see them. They'd see me lip singing in front of a mirror and then was off to the next psychiatrist. But that's another story. Anyway, feelings fade over time unless re-stimulated. I also was listening to our songs. You know how songs kind of bring you back and all that stuff. I circled around her house on Jude Place, saw a strange car, and immediately my mind jumped to it's the Lawrence High School football team being entertained in her bedroom. It was actually, you know, her grandmother's car or something like that. I would call, hang up, have her picture, etc. What's happening? Feelings aren't fading over time because I'm constantly re-stimulating them. I deal with people with food addiction, I'll call it, or eating disorders, that are addicted to a scale. So if the scale moves to the left, they're euphoric. If it moves to the right, they're calling suicide prevention. Totally, the primary source of whether they're feeling good or bad, their moods, are based on a number on a scale. We should all relate to this because it could be money, it could be a relationship. Whenever you have one source of, you know, as your primary source of feeling good or bad, you know, your hand, you know, you're in the hands of something outside yourself that controls how you feel, just like alcohol and drugs. Anyway, we call them triggers today, correct? Okay. This principle is important, I think, in recovery because you want to re-stimulate some feelings and you want to let go of others. So where this gets controversial in the clinical realm, and I know this is controversial, is in treating trauma. If you're treating trauma and someone has repressed memories and that sort of thing, it is appropriate to bring them to the surface. But I don't know about you guys, but I see people that have been through 3, 4, 5 treatment centers, 3, 4, 5 therapists, and all that's happening at that time is they're re-experiencing, re-stimulating the feelings and the symptoms. They're not getting better, they're getting worse. So this principle has, there's more to this than it seems. Also, how about in relationships? Anybody have been in a relationship where in the beginning you would die for someone, like Paula, and then you kind of get bored in the relationship or whatever over time, and the thrill is gone, right? Feelings fade over time unless re-stimulated. If we're not doing loving things, if we're not remembering anniversaries, if we're not telling someone we love them, if we're not being, you know, affectionate and all that stuff, I guarantee you any relationship you name to me will fade over time because it's not re-stimulated. One last piece and I'll move on. Why would you still go to 12-step meetings if you're in recovery? Your feelings would fade over time. Intellectually, you would remember you have a problem. Emotionally, there'd be a disconnect. So there are lots of principles in a 12-step program that follow this concept. So sometimes we want to re-stimulate an unpleasant feeling so we don't repeat history. And sometimes we want to re-stimulate a positive feeling so it doesn't fade. Yep. I'm sorry.
How is this different from EFT? Because this is a lot of the same person.
Yeah, it is. And it's borrowed from Constructive Living. This, just to give you a little history and then I'll kind of go on. This is not David Reynolds. You know, this is his interpretation of Eastern philosophy. So if you trace this back, it goes thousands of years. You'll see books like Just Do It or, you know, so there's nothing new about this, but this is where it originated. And it has some nuances and points that are unique to all of that. But there's nothing that, that you haven't heard before, but haven't seen it in the way, I think, that, that it's being framed. Okay. Did I explain David Reynolds, by the way, is an anthropologist who's a psychiatry professor at, I think it's UCLA's medical school. And I met him in 1987. And he still is today. He's an anthropologist by training, but he stayed in Japan for 20 years and learned their psychiatric modalities and whatnot. And he westernized it and took 3 three components. One that we're talking about today is Morita, Dr. Morita's approach to treating neuroses. The other is it's called Naikan, or a Dr. Naikan therapy, and it's about meditation, gratitude, and Eastern philosophy about that piece. And then integrated with all of that is the whole idea of meditation and mindfulness. So they kind of all come together. And when I look at a 12-step program and you look at the history, my first impression, this is going a little bit off in a tangent, but stay with me, was the Oxford group and the Washingtonians and so on and so forth were very evangelical types of groups. And when you look at it as a whole, most people think of it as a Judeo-Christian kind of philosophy that's integrated into something that's more palatable, I think, for people that are suffering from alcoholism, drug addiction, and other compulsions. They kind of trick you into it. But anyway, the truth is, when you look a little bit harder, it's really about universal truths, and it's as much from Eastern philosophy as it is from Judeo-Christian philosophy. They all have universal truths in them. So for me, and I think for a lot of people, the notion of spirituality is a better fit for a lot of people because it stays away from the dogma or the what some people think as the rigidity of ritual in some religions. So, you know. All right. So if you can remember Paula Goldberg, have I mentioned Paula Goldberg? Yeah, okay. By the way, I looked her up on Facebook. She wouldn't friend me. And she's married. I found out she's married to an exterminator. This is a true story. You know Truly Nolan, the mouse, VW stuff? That's who she's married to. Okay. There is a God. Okay. Feelings and thoughts cannot be directly, or they can be indirectly influenced by behavior. This is important, real important, because the tagline in all of this, and in recovery, and in life, I think, this is very distilling the essence, is that what really counts is what you do. In 12-step parlance, it's your actions, not your intentions. And in this philosophy, what you do is really of paramount importance because it is not a guarantee, but it is the only, short of chemicals, the only way you can indirectly influence how you're thinking and feeling. A couple of examples real quickly. How many of you exercise but really don't like exercising, but like when you're done, right? So if you're I call it Chardonnay exercising for me, which means I whine while I'm putting on my sneakers and my shorts and whatever. And the truth of the matter is that I'll have thoughts, if I'm honest, if you become aware of your thoughts. I don't really want to exercise today. I did it yesterday. It looks like it might rain outside. I'm tired. I'm restless. I'm irritable, blah, 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 blah. And I do that while I'm putting on my shorts and getting ready. And I know very few people that regret exercising after they've done it. However, what you're really looking at is your feelings and thoughts, right? Your attitude, if you will, about exercising or something that you feel is, not something you really are enamored to do, will change after the fact. If some of you have had the experience of not wanting to go to a meeting or speak at a meeting or go out with friends or whatever, and did it because you were obligated to do it, more often than not, your feelings and thoughts regarding that or your mood will change as a result of what you do. It is a cardinal piece of paramount importance in any counseling or therapy that we do. The proof is in the doing, not in the talking. Where's that come from? So, simple, but very, very, very important. And then last, as in recovery, as in life, we're responsible for what we do no matter how we feel. Man, goes before a judge because he physically abused his wife. Judge says, well, what happened? He says, well, she did this X, Y, and Z, and I lost control. Judge says, well, have you ever done that to your boss? No. Mitigating circumstances don't count in life, really. So we're responsible for what we do no matter how we feel. Wreckage. So those are, that's a broad stroke of all this. We'll come back to it. The other thing that I kind of skipped over fast is that, again, feelings need to be accepted as is. If you've heard of acceptance, that's where it's coming from, or vice versa. The point is, it's not about pushing them aside. It's about tolerating discomfort without having to fix your feelings. Again, all addictions are about fixing feelings. Recovery is about tolerating them and still doing what you need to do. Not every itch needs to be scratched. So when I introduce this to some audiences, there's a lot of defensiveness. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Arthur Schopenhauer has a lot of quotes, but this one I think is great. All truth passes through 3 stages. It's ridiculed, it's violently opposed, it's accepted as being self-evident. Tell me where attitudes about drug addiction and alcohol were 70 years ago, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 2 days ago. It's a brain disease. We all kind of know that, right? Maybe we know that, but I don't think the rest of the world is so much on the same page. However, it's getting there. So the medical profession, although it's, got some catching up to do, has certainly accepted this in terms of getting close to the third piece of all of this. We treat it as a disease today, or we're supposed to. Tell that to the thousands and thousands of people in jail who are not being treated. So it's ridiculed, it's opposed, and then it's going to be self-evident. This is really controversial. It might be that they will follow this in terms of legalizing drugs so people can use if they opt to, but in a safe way, and do away with all the crime and do away with not treating people who will want to be treated. So anyway, he's my friend. Then these are the common myths. I just thought I would mention them because I really, was part of this club. Feelings cause us to do what we do. Anybody have children? Feelings. The devil made me do it. Okay. This one's real important. We must fix feelings somehow in order to get on with our lives. We must fix feelings. Let me tell you something that just keep an open mind to. In my experience, personally and professionally, there's an implied, not a spoken, but an implied contract between me and any psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, drug counselor I've ever seen personally. And the implied contract had been this: you fix how I feel, and I'll change what I do. Well, think about it. I work in the field of eating disorders, so an anorectic will say to me, I'm not putting on a bathing suit. And what's happening is they're really saying to me, if you fix how I feel about my body, then I'll put on a bathing suit. If you fix how I feel when I'm, having anxiety because I can't deal with it socially, I'll stop drinking. When you fix and you fill in the blank, and then you fill in the blank. In my world, anytime you put a feeling as a condition to doing something, it's not going to happen. So the implied contract is you change how I feel and I'll change what I do. Unfortunately, a lot of therapists still are sucked into that or seduced into that kind of a contract. The contract in constructive living is, here's what you need to do between now and the next time I see you. So let me give you an aside of how this would work. What do you think is the most major complaint for people under 30 in Japan? This is David Reynolds' world now. What would you think is the major complaint? Why people go see a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, therapist, whatever. What's the major one complaint? Shyness. Shyness. I don't think it's limited to Japan, but in their culture, that's a big piece. Okay? So, let's say you're shy and you go to a psychoanalyst. You could take 10 years of insight-oriented therapy, and what's going to happen? Are you going to become less shy, do you think? Probably not. And we can go on with all of that. If he were seeing, or she were seeing, a constructive living trained counselor, this is how it would go. There probably would be no more than 6 sessions. I think if we all did this, we'd starve to death. But anyway, it is what it is. The first session would be, okay, so I'm sorry you feel that way, but your feelings are not, a license to stay in your room. And if what you want is a relationship, then you would need to be around people that you would like to have a relationship with. Fair enough? Okay. So the first assignment is, I want you to find 3 people, not that you're overly attracted to, you could pick whatever 3 people you like, but people that prospectively you would like to date. And don't ask them out, per se. Ask them for coffee. That's your assignment. 3 people, ask them for coffee. I don't care if you're foaming at the mouth, if you're flopping around like a fish, because you're so nervous, or you have an epileptic seizure, you still need to ask them out for coffee. Half the people will not return to the therapy session because they are not willing to do it. What people will say is, I can't. I can't handle it, I can't do it, I can't make it, I can't afford it. The word can't needs to be taken out of their dictionary. The truth is they don't want to. They'd be much more honest to say, I don't want to, not I can't. Anyway, so the other half come in and they've asked 3 people out to coffee. And then it progresses along those lines. And then the next stage is to ask someone out. And then, the next stage is despite being rejected or whatever, and we go on. But by 6 sessions, that person should know what they need to do to find a relationship. Now, I know this is logic and Mr. Spock kind of stuff, but would you say if someone were doing and following these instructions, they would, unless they're the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but maybe they'd find another hunchback, who knows, that they would finally find someone that they started a relationship with? Of course. The issue is that their feelings need to be accepted. You can feel empathy or sympathy for someone, but it's not something to change. Because people like myself and you all sometimes need to do things that we're uncomfortable or don't want to do. There's nothing mysterious about that. But in therapy, for some reason, we're supposed to, I love this phrase, work through. Can someone tell me what the hell work through means? I doubt it. So, anyway. It's at this point a lot of people start throwing objects at me, but okay. So we must fix feelings somehow in order to get on with our lives. Do I have to be motivated to exercise? No. I'll exercise when I'm motivated. Right. It's going to be like Bates Motel. You turn around and see the mother. It's skeletal. I know this is a big one. We have hidden, unconscious feelings lurking in our psyche. Hush. Okay. Getting in touch with hidden feelings and letting them out is possible and necessary. Anybody go through Pataka bat therapy or, burning your mother in effigy or something like that? Okay. Remember, feelings fade over time unless re-stimulated. So if you're recounting and reliving your anger, you might temporarily feel a little bit better, but I guarantee you what's really happening is you're just re-stimulating the past. I don't think it has as much therapeutic value as people thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a possibly somewhat different way of dealing with emotions than the way I work. For me, emotions and the thing you're getting to next is how do you feel about that is a great way of establishing connection, relationship, and provides some context, which goes to the next thing, which is behavior change. So my way of working, if the person feels understood and validated, then we have a conversation eventually about what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, it's a fair point. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging or good listening skills and conveying that you have empathy or sympathy and have heard what someone says and how they feel. But you don't want to give the impression unwittingly that that becomes a prerequisite for getting better. I understand about the relationship piece. Yeah. In some instances that may be important, but in my world, okay, it's of secondary importance to someone having faith in what you're doing rather than who you are. Yeah. I think this gets a little murky. I believe that a relationship has to have trust, and someone needs to believe or have faith that the therapist or the counselor or whatever has information and can direct me in a place or in a direction that's going to help me. No question about that. But beyond that, however you do that, beyond that, it's equally important that the patient, the client, all right, does not see that they're getting better is a function of their relationship with you, but is more a function of what they're doing outside of the treatment. This can get really controversial when you get into things like sponsorship and things of that sort, and counseling and therapy and whatnot, because I believe that that people get seduced into pleasing the therapist, and people get seduced into recovery because they want to keep their marriage or whatever. And unless that converts very quickly into I'm doing it because it's the right thing for me to do, they relapse. Right. Yeah.
Do you not find any value in asking somebody how do you feel about that, only to lead them to be aware of their own feelings? Because I find most of my clients, if you ask them how they feel, they can't tell you how they feel because they don't have the language for it. They don't know where their feelings are coming from, and they're acting out this stuff all the time. I don't think that our feelings are unconscious so much as that we are unconscious.
Okay, so this, there's nothing wrong with helping someone identify how they feel. And at that point, they need to accept how they feel without having to change that. Okay.
Somebody told me one time that we should relate to our feelings like we have a 2-year-old in the car. You don't let them drive, but you don't stick them in the trunk either.
Yeah, that's clever. That's clever.
You gotta live with them.
Yeah.
But
Again, the principle is feelings need to be accepted as they are. So, but if the main thrust of therapy is giving the message to the client or the patient that you're out of touch with your feelings, and so getting in touch with your feelings is going to make you better, that, I believe, is a mistake. If what you're saying to someone or the message that you're giving them is getting in touch with your feelings or becoming aware of them, is a big piece of your getting better, but the bigger piece of your getting better is what you're doing or not doing with those feelings. So you're constantly going, okay, I don't want to confuse people with that. There was something else this gets a little controversial too. Sometimes people will say they're out of touch with their feelings, and it's not that they're out of touch with their feelings. They're very in touch with their feelings. They just don't want to feel them. So you can get misled, about that, and they're very invested in numbing their feelings rather than accepting them as they are. That doesn't mean that there are people that are in a cloud, in early recovery, let's say, or trauma or whatever, that aren't aware of what they're experiencing emotionally. They're so numb, and they've been so proficient at repressing emotion that they do need some help with that. I'm just very cautious not to give them the message that that is the end game of what they're doing in therapy.
Or they've been taught that it's not okay for them to feel that way.
Yeah.
It's not okay for them to be
Yeah.
angry, or it's not okay for them to be afraid.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I'm just saying I'm adding to that. But once you are experiencing what you're feeling, you need to accept it as it is and not have to fix that in order to now, get on with your life. That's all I'm saying. I know it's a little bit much, but okay. Getting in touch with hidden feelings, we talked about. How do you feel about that? Should be the basic query in psychotherapy. It's one of many. I don't think it's the basic one. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of people out there that get very hooked into their success in therapy as a therapist is making someone feel better. It's called codependency. Okay. Working through, as I said, I don't know what the hell that means. Feelings must change to be motivated to change behavior. No. We're going to take a break in 5 minutes, so hang in there. That's Paula Goldberg. On the left is my friend Vinny, and in the middle, in my hand, is a cigarette, in case there are any police officers here. It's really not a cigarette. Anyway. So these are just, they call Maximus or whatever. As I said, this is kind of redundant, but I think just about all addictions are about control or manipulating how you feel. By the way, just a quick thing, personally and professionally, this is how I see addiction. I'm going to distill it. Beginning stage, I'll use alcohol as an example, but it could be food, it could be gamut, whatever. In the beginning, as you all know, it works. It's wonderful. I can dance like John Travolta. At least in my mind, everybody else is calling 911 because they think I'm having a grand mal seizure, but I think I'm doing great. I look great. I'm not inhibited. I'm not socially angry. It's great. Okay. Middle stage, it's losing some of its luster. It's not as great, but it's still worth doing, and I'm having some consequences and whatnot. And I'm always anticipating that it's going to be good again, like beginning stage, and I'm always disappointed it never turns out that way. Where most people end up in treatment is end stage. An end stage, not physically, but as I'm talking about, end stage is when you're doing the behavior or the substance, not to feel good anymore, but to avoid how it feels to not be doing it. It's taking a Xanax so you can answer the phone, or a drink so that you can get to work, far away from beginning stage. So it's still, across all three stages, about controlling feelings. And when you work your way backwards in recovery, it's still about transcending how you feel. So I would say recovery is about cultivating the discipline of transcending feelings and doing the next right thing. Nothing original about that. This is something I would encourage, someone told this to me and it really put a light on, in early recovery, and I thought it was really important. There's a tendency for a lot of people to judge the quality of their program or their recovery based on how they're feeling. Big mistake. When I look back, you can be, or I could be, feeling terrible and doing really good. And unfortunately, you could be feeling really good. You know how like you have radar in early recovery and you're single and you pick out somebody in the room that, you know, in your mind you're arguing over silverware and what to name the first child and you never met the person, you know, that kind of thing. You can be feeling great and doing bad also. So feelings aren't a great barometer, either in therapy or in recovery. Actions are. Okay. And feelings take care of themselves over time. We forget this, I forget this when I'm in pain. I don't forget it when I'm feeling good. I just wait for the next shoe to drop. When is this going to end? This feels great. So my obsession is about future, past, but never about present. Anyway, there's no emotion, mood, or feeling that's permanent. So impulse control is about scratching the itch. The reality, prefrontal cortex logic kind of thing, is there, you know, this too shall pass. So, judge by our actions, not intentions, same thing, both philosophies. That's an Eastern philosophy, not a Judeo-Christian one, by the way. Living in the solution rather than the problem. Acceptance, radical acceptance, even DBT gets into the act. Doing the next right thing despite how we feel, both. Responsible for what we do and the consequences. Gratitude, we'll talk about Naikan after the break. Humility, knowing what we can change and what we cannot change. Ever hear that before? Mindfulness, living in the present, we'll talk about that also. So let's take a bathroom break and reconvene. How about a quarter after? So this is what usually happens. I have like 40 slides and I'm only on 9. Oh well, okay. So is this making sense to most of you? Okay, good, good. All right. Let me just, because I think we could all spend a lot of time on mindfulness and meditation, but you know, I did a little review of the research because I was a skeptic way back when, and you know, the way my personality and physiology is, it's been very hard for me to sit still, as you might notice. In any case, on the personal side, having spent some time doing meditation, meaning that for me it's just concentrating on breathing. It's not complicated, and just trying to be aware of when my mind hijacks me from being able to focus. Just being aware of the thoughts, not trying to change them, control them, or anything. It's a very simple thing. So for me, meditation used to mean something that sounded very, I don't know, ethereal or crazy or new agey or whatever. And it really just is a matter of putting on some earbuds, maybe doing a 10-minute guided thing, focusing on breathing, and nothing more than just being aware that my mind takes me for a ride, and then the content of what, you know, what it took me for a ride for, and nothing more, nothing less, and not judging that. And it's, you know, it's made some changes for the positive. Sometimes it's the benefits are a little exaggerated, and it's real important not to have unrealistic expectations about it. So my only advice is if you do try this, give it at least 30 days with a batting average of doing it, you know, maybe at least 20 or 25 times out of the 30 days, even for just 10 minutes, and then you can judge for yourself, because the proof is in the doing, right? The other thing I was going to say that the mindfulness piece, which ties into the meditation and 11th step and all of that stuff, is really, I know this sounds simplistic, is really about becoming aware of how often or how much time we all spend thinking 5 minutes ahead, 5 days ahead, 5 years ahead, 5 whatever ahead, or 5 seconds behind, 5 minutes behind, but nothing about really being present right this moment. And we can do that, and if when you try to do that, you'll find, just like a meditation, your mind is hijacking you into 1,000 different ways. I'm going to just tell you how this works for eating disorders, but you can apply it to whatever. That's what I'm most acquainted with, because that's what I do. But you'll identify with this. How many of you have eaten a meal and didn't realize you finished the meal? Where your mind's racing? To me, it's like reading a book and you're 20 pages into it and you don't remember anything because your mind took you for a vacation, right? And all of that. Here's the problem with that. This is eating disorder piece, so, see if you could apply it or whatnot. I grew up with a friend, Harry. Some of you grew up with a Harriet. Harry does not have an obsessive compulsive or addiction chromosome. When, like in Frankenstein, they didn't drop the normal brain and put the abnormal one in him. So, and I grew up different with the disease of Moore. Well, it could be Schmore, but, Moore. Okay. There's something called internal and external cues of regulating appetite or hunger. Hunger is physiological need to eat. Appetite is hedonic, or when you eat because you're not hungry, but it looks good or whatever. It's translation, you eat a bite of cake and say, I'm too full, and you push it aside. It's leaving over half a vodka martini because they called you to your table. That's internal cue people like Harry, that's what he does. He ends a relationship and doesn't stalk somebody. Okay. So he's governed more by internal cues of hunger, right? So stomach growling, low blood sugar, feeling tired. You all know what internal hunger is when you haven't eaten for a while. So 75% of when he eats, what he eats, and how much he eats is governed by internal physical need and cues. And external is 25%. External is sight of food, smell of food, talking about food. It's outside your body. The one exception is emotion. Okay, so Harry or Harriet will usually say, "I'm too anxious to eat." Marty would say, "I'm too anxious not to eat." Sort of like that. So you get the picture. Harry can pull up a lounge chair in front of Mrs. Fields and have a bite of a cookie, and that'd be fine. If a Marty pulled up a lounge chair in front of Mrs. Fields, not only would the cookies be missing, but so would Mrs. Fields. Mindfulness becomes important because if you're externally oriented and your mind is racing and you're not watching what you're doing, whatever the substance or behavior is, you deprived yourself of the reward, and the reward is external. It's not, so you could be full, but you feel as if you were cheated out of some form of pleasure, that amygdala part. So people that have an eating disorder, it's very important for them to be mindful of what's happening around food. Otherwise, it's like eating in a blackout. Now, I don't know that applies to drinking. I wouldn't, food you're eating all day long, I wouldn't advise controlled drinking. So I wouldn't focus on the martini and try and sip it and whatnot if you're an alcoholic. Lord knows I've tried, but that won't work. But the principle is basically paying attention to what you're doing and being present. And that is an Eastern philosophy, but I think it's amazing that in 1939 they still incorporated all of that into a program. So the prayer part, most people know how to do in their own way, but the meditation part, I think, gets lost in the dust. Although it's becoming more prevalent in 12-step meetings to have 11-step meetings. And really contemplative exercises permeate all 12-step programs as well as constructive living. 4th step, right? 11th step, so on. Okay? Just thought I would throw that in. So going on with all of this, I'm kind of going through this a little bit fast, but in making kind of the parallels between 12-step programs, 12-step recovery, and constructive living, the making amends piece really comes or is in sync with what's called Naikan. And there are 3 questions in Naikan approaches in Japan. And the 3 questions that they ask the patient or the client are, you know, what have you been given, or what have you taken, what have you given, and what troubles have you caused? Actually, if this is done right, if you made a list, and let's say you had an abusive parent or an alcoholic parent or someone that you had a lot of resentment with, if you made the list and you did this the right way, you would find a lot more that you took from than you gave, and more troubles that you've caused. In other words, if you think about it, I know this sounds like a stretch, but if you had a parent that was a little bit abusive when you were an infant, in order for you to have survived, someone had to feed you, someone had to change you, so there were some things that were done for you. It's impossible for you to give back what you were getting at certain points of your life. So I know I'm oversimplifying this, but it's an exercise to look at what's going on. I've done this with my work, okay? And I own a treatment center. So what happens is, when I look at that honestly, what have I given? I've given a lot. I mean, I get a lot of positive reinforcement from people for helping them and whatnot. But I've been given far more, that's the truth, than I've given back, and I give back a lot. Just to stay with that. And what troubles have I caused? Not a lot, but I would need to look at that piece as well. So it's just an exercise to do. We're not responsible for our feelings, and we're not responsible for our thoughts. If you're Catholic here, I apologize, but having thoughts of lust or whatever, or anything else, you don't have control over that. So how could you be responsible for what you... Yeah, okay, wait. How could you be responsible for something you can't control? I hope you're not a priest.
No, but you feed the dragon. Come on, you can. It's just like anything else.
Go ahead.
You can control your thoughts by focusing on other things.
For how long?
If I want to focus on, if I focus on gratitude, then all the other thoughts aren't in my life.
Okay.
The way I work my recovery program is that if I'm focused on what God wants me to do, then all those other thoughts don't come into my life nearly as often.
Nearly as often?
Nearly as often. But, of course everybody has thoughts occasionally, but if I think about, if I feed the lust, if I feed the thoughts, that's how they control me rather than I'm not controlling them.
I understand what you're saying.
You are responsible for your thoughts, though.
No. How can you be responsible for something that you can't control?
If I'm focusing here rather than here, I am controlling.
Only temporarily. All right, here's so we don't get caught up in this, because I think we're saying the same thing. I don't think the disconnect is as much as you think. But will you try something? Just try something, okay? This is where I'm coming from. All right, close your eyes for a minute. Just, I know this is kind of hard to do, and just concentrate on your breathing. All right, just focus on your breathing, and focus on, maybe your nostrils where the air is coming in, or your stomach going up and down, or whatever part of your breathing you want. Okay? and just try to stay with that for the next 2 minutes. Okay, it's less than 2 minutes. Truthfully, because you work an honest program, right? Okay. You didn't have any thought other than your breathing? Any thought other than the breathing?
Basically, well, because I do this every day, you know, I spend 15, 20, 40
Okay.
minutes in meditation. My thoughts are relax, 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 relax. That's what my thoughts are. So I'm controlling my thoughts.
Okay, that's a mantra, I get that. But,
So that is
but you
control.
don't have any other thought about the room, about...
For that 2 minutes, no, I didn't.
Okay. Good for you.
Or 45 seconds, whatever
Okay.
it was. Because that's all training, right? That's, if you train yourself, you can control lots of things. You know, my favorite quote from Bill Wilson is, if I focus on the problem gets bigger.
Sure.
When I focus on the solution
Okay.
gets bigger. So the more time I spend focusing on the solution, the less time all the other problems are there.
Yeah. You,
And that is
you
controlling
have,
my thoughts.
you have more control in directing your thoughts than the average bear. However, I don't think that you would want your entire recovery to be dependent on controlling your thoughts at all times.
I wouldn't, well, I want my complete recovery focused on what God wants me to do. Right? Now,
Okay.
whether I do that perfectly is far from that, but that's what I focus on. And so it's all a matter of anything is all a matter of practice.
Right.
Meditation isn't hard.
Okay. So
But
let me...
it's hard for me because
so-
I've been doing it for 25 years.
Yeah, no, it's great.
You know,
It's great that you've been doing that. But the key is you've been doing something.
that's what I'm saying. You can control things if you practice.
You can indirectly control them by what you do. I don't think you can absolutely control your thoughts.
Do I never have a lustful thought? No, I do have.
Yeah,
lustful
well,
thoughts.
that's
Do
all
I
I'm
never
saying.
have you know,
That's all I'm
avarice?
saying.
Yes, those do
You're,
occur, but they
we'll-
occur
we end
less
up, listen, we end up quantifying. Oh, come on, guys. Let me, all right, okay.
But I mean, it doesn't need to be all or nothing either, and I think that that's kind of where we've lost some of the conversation. It goes back to what you were saying in the beginning. We need to be aware of our thoughts, but our thoughts and our actions are different. But I think that we've gotten into this conversation about all or nothing.
Yeah, rather than overanalyze this, I do understand what's being said. So in all fairness, it's a misinterpretation, I think, of what's being said here. Everybody in this room has a certain amount of ability to direct their thinking. And we can get into quantifying who could do it more for longer than whatever. But the reality is the reason you do meditation and the reason for an 11-step or contemplative therapies is in the spirit of being able to become more aware of how your mind can control you. And that what you're really trying to do is not control your mind, but not let it control you. That's all we're really saying. Yep.
There's a piece of this that is also about learning how to tolerate
Yeah.
whatever the emotion is or
Yeah.
whatever the thought process
Right.
is so that you can get past it,
Yeah.
not get caught by it and take an action.
Yeah. The saying that you're acquainted with is if you have a thought, let it come in, but don't serve it tea.
Right.
Right? Okay. We will move on. So this is an important point. Okay. The important point is this. Constructive living, AA, NA, or NEA, is not therapy. It's a support group. There's a difference. So it means more than meets the eye, because it means it doesn't have to be facilitated or taught by someone that has letters after their name. So the teaching, whether it's sponsorship or someone that's an instructor in CL or whatever, is more based on someone's experience than it is based on their textbook knowledge. Doesn't mean it excludes professionals. I integrate it all the time. But I've met some people that, that do this better than I do, and they're not, they don't do counseling for a living. So just an FYI. Oh, one of my big ones. Restraint of, this has to be updated. Restraint of action, which is tolerance and patience, right? Feelings fade over time unless re-stimulated. Did I mention Paula Goldberg? Okay. Mitch. Okay. Restraint of tongue and pen and reply all. Email. Okay. Do you ever push that button and wish you could reach in a moment of anger? Okay. Meditation we talked about. Both programs recognize a reliance on a source other than self-knowledge. Constructive living doesn't call higher power or God or get into those issues because if it comes from a Buddhist tradition, it's the God within or it's within. So it doesn't use that language, but it does delineate between, in neurological terms, both hemispheres of your brain. So you're really trying to communicate with, I would call it your soul or your higher purpose or whatever. Feeling gratitude, that's a big one. Love, healthy, one must do. This is important because this is the way I like to look at it. I mean, to keep it simple. If I want to feel courage, I have to do courageous things. If I want to feel healthy, I have to do healthy things. If I want to sustain love or feel love, I have to do loving things. It's about putting an action or a verb in something rather than a feeling. It's not that I want to feel courageous, it's that I want to do courageous. And if I want to feel courageous, it's the opposite way around. The feelings, not a guarantee, come after the doing, not the other way around. Very important. Okay. Both encourage positive deeds without seeking acknowledgement. Anybody pay a toll for somebody? I hate it when someone suggested I do that. Okay. I have money issues. Self-esteem necessitates doing esteemable things and so on and so forth. I won't get into this, but technically, there are three things that happen when we learn therapy. I mean, if I really get it simplistically, okay? One is that you focus on feelings, and if you can change feelings, then you'll change someone's thinking, and then in the end, it will change someone's behavior. Then along comes another school of thought that says, hey, change or control your thoughts. That will influence your feelings, and in the end, that'll change behavior. And what we're looking about is, and in AA it's the same principle, you can't get sober until you stop drinking, right? So it's about doing first and then indirectly influencing how you think or feel. Now there's one caveat I haven't talked about, expectations. And the reason I say that is, here's my experience. I started doing this, and it was quite a while ago. I hope you don't take this the wrong way. Okay, so my wife was teaching, special ed teacher, and she usually comes home before I do. And what ended up happening is I came home one afternoon, and there were dishes in the sink. I'm in very early recovery, so please excuse me. So I see the dishes. My thoughts are, why didn't she do the dishes? I mean, I work harder than her. She's supposed to, and you go through that dialogue, feelings, resentment, whatever. I'm not going to call my sponsor on that one then. Okay, but I'm into constructive living because I'm really, trying this out. The proof's in the doing, right? If you don't do something, you're not going to remember it. So reality, higher power, whatever, put dishes in the sink. The next right thing to do is what? Wash the dishes. No problem. I'm being mindful. I'm washing the dishes very slowly. I'm like ready to go to India. All right, so I'm like doing this, but now my mind is moving, right? And my mind is saying, you know what? She's going to come home and she's going to be so grateful and so surprised and so enamored that I did these dishes that we're going to have theme night right in the kitchen. It's going to be like, oh my God, she's going to be like falling all over me. So I finish the dishes, and just as I'm finishing them, she comes in, sits down on the couch, and proceeds to tell me what a horrible day she's had and didn't even notice the dishes were done. The point is this. The guarantee when you clean dishes is clean dishes. If you have expectations that constructive living will make you feel something, you're going to be in trouble. It'll indirectly maybe make you feel something, but there's no guarantee. The only guarantee is what's tangible. So if I go to a meeting and I didn't feel like going to the meeting, or the speaker, my mind is not really a good speaker, or whatever is in my mind, and I'm feeling tired and I'm irritable, blah, 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 but I go anyway, it's not a guarantee I'm going to feel better after the meeting. High probability, but not a guarantee. The only thing that I can promise myself that's real is I'll be at a meeting. And the reason I say that's important, because when I've worked with people, they think they're going into recovery for themselves, and they're expecting people to acknowledge them. It's as if when you get off the plane from being in treatment, they're going to have the mayor there to hand you the key to the city, and and everybody's going to like bow, and the family's going to be enamored and whatnot. It's a setup. Because if your expectations, where we hear this, your spirituality and expectations need to be together, well, the truth of the matter is that we all have expectations. I don't think you can control how you think, but if you're aware, that you're doing this, and that the only thing you can guarantee is what you've done, you'll be far ahead of the game. Because that's where people relapse or they give up on something. They want to get their marriage back. 6 months later, they're sober. Their wife leaves anyway, and they drink. You do the dishes. Your wife walks in. It's just clean dishes. Yeah.
The analogy I use with my clients is I was about to get married, and one of the things that I said to my, at that point, husband was, it's important to me, I have no idea why, that the toilet paper goes over the top of the bowl.
Oh, you're one of those.
And he said, and I said, would you please pay attention to
Right.
that? And his comment was, and this really has stuck with me, I'll try, but I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to do it, because if I do, you're going to be upset with me if I don't. If it's important to you, then it's your responsibility to change the toilet paper, if you see it that way. We've been married now for a while, and he is sitting right behind me.
Yeah, but you can't see the faces he's making.
She knows what they are.
Right. It's a call. Go
But
ahead.
the piece of that was, whose expectation is it? Whose responsibility is it?
Right.
Because if I'm having the expectation, then I'm the one that has the potential for the upset, for the goodness, for the whole thing. I'm the one that's responsible to do it.
Yeah. Here's the thing with most people, but to the 10th power with people that have any history of addiction, the primary guiding force is ego. And under that, you have control and trust. So the codependent thing is you need to change the toilet paper. The control thing is it's going to be my way or the highway. And the trust piece is he doesn't trust himself, but you don't trust him. to do it. So, but all roads lead back, this is just my opinion, to the ego. The ego doesn't want to let go of control, but the ego also says, I'm entitled, if you love me enough, you would do this. Of course it's distorted. Yeah.
What the program's saying is expectations are down payments on resentments.
Right.
And expectations are resentments of the
Right.
is another
Same thing. We're going to be saying the same thing with different semantics of words, but we get the concept. Definitely. Okay. So other approaches, I integrate all these approaches. No one's a one-trick pony here. So DBT has a lot of elements that I think are really valuable, and I'm not going to go through them, but I would say that harm reduction has a place, but not with abstinence. Skills training, implementation of harm reduction, coping skills. And CL, as I said, that you view the therapist as a mentor, not somebody, that's sitting on a throne, and also not to put a sponsor on a pedestal. Here's how I look at it. In order for someone to have a therapeutic or good value, this is what therapy was like for me when I was the patient. The therapist was sitting with a tuxedo on, and I had to sit there with my underwear on. That's what therapy is, isn't it? So in order for it to work, either you both have tuxedos or you both have underwear. Because if that's not the case, it was something that was invented in the 1800s that I think is BS. Okay, just my thought. Solution-oriented, both. Non-judgmental, both. Emotional regulation, both. Just it's 2017 language instead of 1939. I think it's called maturity. Okay. 12-step programs, community-based, support groups, not treatment. Non-professional. Similar in principles. Prescribes a course of action. Encourages meditation and mindfulness. Steps 4, 10, and 11 in my mind are the correlations. Feelings change over time. I won't go into this. East meets West. It's a Cookie Monster, by the way. Okay, let me end with this, and then you can all go home. I have an acronym. There's one in recovery called HALT, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You all know that one. I use one for eating disorders, but I also use it across the board. It's called SURF. Or you can use SMURF, which I will explain. It's spirituality, exercise, rest, and food plan. They all have some meaning, but spirituality is purposefully ambiguous because it's so personal. But you all kind of get the flavor of what that is. The trick is in doing these, not in feeling them. So doing spirituality is different than feeling spiritual, although what you're doing may indirectly influence that. Exercise in the service of your recovery and your health, not in the service of losing weight per se. Rest, a balance between work, play, and self-care. Balance between work and play. Food plan, I'm an advocate of sugar-free and as little processed foods as possible, but healthy eating, whatever your boundaries around food are. The SMURF would go spirituality, meditation, exercise, rest, and food plan. So I have a choice. Okay, any questions, comments? Was this helpful for you guys? Okay, good. Any questions or comments or going once, going twice? Yes?
Could you say anything else about how going within is like a higher power, like in the Buddhist and Eastern?
Yeah, it's just that flavors of spirituality differ. And so some people don't put an image to a higher power. Like in Christianity, it's Christ. In Judaism, it might be Moses. And people have different images. In Buddhism, it's not something up there on a higher power or deity. It's that exists in all of us, and that's within. I mean, that's keeping it very simple. That's all. Otherwise, you get into all kinds of stuff. Well, anyway, thank you all for coming. I really enjoyed doing this.